Good evening, televiewers. Welcome to this first edition of Prime Hour for the week on My Media Prime TV. This evening, we're going to be revisiting the celebrations of our National Day, a day that is dedicated to celebrate our unity as a nation. 20th of May was celebrated across Cameroon. All 10 regions, divisions and subdivisions saw Cameroonians project and celebrate their attachment and love for the nation. We this evening are going to be tracing what actually happened on the 20th of May 1972, looking up to what we celebrated over the weekend across the national territory. We are looking at this with panelists who are in the house. Senior Barrister Ashu Emmanuel is in the house with us this evening. He is the National President of the Reform Party. Good evening, Senior Barrister. We're glad to have you.
Good evening, Mr. Kum. Good evening to your televiewers all over the world. Good evening to all the members and sympathizers of Reform Party. I hope we are going to give you some satisfaction in our analysis of the topic.
We also in the company of Ndifor Richard, who is a shadow cabinet member of the a member of the Social Democratic Front, but he is also a teacher of history in Cameroon. Good evening, Ndifor. We're glad to have you.
Good evening, Joe, and thanks for having me.
We also are expecting Ndukong Clovis to join us in the course of this edition of the program. He is a teacher of history, also with some schools out here in Cameroon. I'll start with you, Senior Barrister Ashu Emmanuel, National President of the Reform Party, to tell Cameroonians what actually happened on the 20th of May 1972.
Thank you, Mr. Kum. We have been informed historically that on the 20th of May 1972 there was what was called a peaceful revolution, that Cameroon moved from the federal structure to the unitary system of the unity state, and that became possible through a referendum that was conducted in this country. Now I want to talk as a legal mind because as we know, in 1972, there was a federal constitution that was put in place. I will look at the federal constitution itself later on, how it came about to exist. But let us just look at the provisions of that federal constitution. When you look at the federal constitution of the first, which is cited as the federal constitution of the 1st of September 1961, that constitution put in place a federal Republic of Cameroon that had a federal government and two federated state governments. The powers of the President of the Federal Republic were spelled out in Articles 5 to 15 of that constitution. And it also had miscellaneous provisions at the end. And when you go through the powers of the President, the powers of the federal legislature, the powers of the assemblies of the federated states, you will see that there is nowhere in that constitution that any mention is made of the word referendum. In fact, the legal minds, when they go through this constitution, ask themselves the question: where did President Ahidjo get the mandate, the power, the constitutional power to organize a referendum in Cameroon that will enable him set aside the federal constitution? And if we look at the provisions of that constitution, of the federal constitution of the 1st of September 1961, there is nowhere in that constitution where the President of the Federal Republic of Cameroon was authorized to organize a referendum. And we are saying that, going by that premises, it is something terrible, because we are celebrating what the law has not provided, because we have a constitution that was existing and from which the then president took his powers to organize a referendum. But unfortunately, that constitution does not seem to have given him the right and the powers to organize a referendum. So, Mr. Kum, I think that any person, any legal mind, or any politician who thinks that what I'm saying is not true should prove me wrong. From this constitution, which I have here, and I think I've made copies that I'll give Mr. Kum and the other panelists, there is nowhere inside this constitution where you will see the powers of the federal president.
Yeah, but
that are spelled from section 5 to section 15.
Yes, that point has been made from the legal standpoint. But
yes.
What actually happened?
Now, what actually happened was that Cameroonians, when you look at the ballot papers that were sent out, the ballot papers bore a choice between we and yes. Do you want Cameroon to move from a federal system to a unitary system? And the choice was between we and yes. So that there again was another, like our senior brother, late senior brother, to say nonsensical nonsense, because you cannot ask somebody to choose between we, which is yes in French, and yes, which is we in English.
But senior barrister, I've had at least 3.
Because since, as I said, in the constitution there was no provision for a referendum. Normally when there is a referendum, it is supposed to go back, because a referendum is a popular consultation, and popular consultations go back to the legislature for ratification. Now, since this one was not provided in the constitution, the results could have been taken to nowhere. You see, that is the other flaw. If the results of that referendum were taken to nobody, the Federal Assembly never saw it, the Federated State Assemblies never saw it. So we have a situation where Cameroonians just got up, they were asked to go to the polls, they went, and a result of, I think, 99 points.
Campaigns were not done?
Well, there were campaigns.
You say Cameroonians just got up and were asked to go to the polls?
Well, there were campaigns, national unity. Then I think I was in Lycée Bilingual Grammar School, Buya, and we actually saw campaigns. There were campaigns. People went around in caravans preaching the virtues of a unity state, to show that we're going to be real brothers, not the brothers who were one living in Jericho, the other one in South Africa. I mean, virtues of togetherness were preached and were made to understand that the unity state was going to bring us more development, because the federal system was being brandished as an expensive system that prevented the government from carrying out developmental projects. And so they were going out, leaving that system to go to one that was going to free more resources that will be used to develop the country.
Okay. Ndifor Richard, I don't know whether that is exactly what happened on the 20th of May 1972, as explained by Senior Barrister Ashu Emmanuel. Cameroonians, first he establishes that President Ahiju took a decision alone to do this, and that Cameroonians just got up and were asked to go to the polls. What are you teaching students about 1972, 20th of May?
Thank you so much, Leonard. You see, it is very difficult to talk about 1972 without going back to look at what transpired in Fuma.
Okay.
Because
I want us everybody to plant a foundation. We're going to go back to all of those things.
Yeah, what I'm saying, why I say it's difficult to talk about 1972 without going back to Fumban is because the grave of the federation was dug in Fumban.
Okay.
We know that it was in Fumban that the federation was the federal republic, or the federal ideology was endorsed, but it was still in Fumban that the grave of the federation was dug, and I will give you a few reasons to explain why. First of all, let me try to correct something that the senior barrister mentioned there. The senior barrister made mention of the fact that there was a single ballot paper during the 1972 referendum. And you know, this is a platform where we try to educate Cameroonians. And if we want to tell Cameroonians what transpired, we should be able to tell them the truth of what really happened. You understand that I am I am one of the critics of the 1972 referendum,
yeah.
and I am also a critic of a unitary state.
Yes, because as SDF, you are going for a federal structure.
Absolutely, and I'm also a member of the Cameroon Federalist groups and activists. So, if what I'm saying does not mean that I'm endorsed the unitary state,
okay,
but at least if we want to talk to Cameroonians, we should let them know what actually transpired. What happened is that there were 2 ballot papers. One carried the yes, and in translation, we. And the other carried the no, and in translation, no. And so Cameroonians were expected to choose one of these ballot papers and put it in an envelope and cast. So if you refuse to endorse the abolition of the federal system or refuse to endorse the unitary system, then you take the no, non-ballot paper and put in the envelope. If you support it, you take the we, yes ballot paper and you put in that. So what I see many people do, which is of course what the senior barrister is doing, is to isolate that ballot paper which says we, yes, and they're brandishing it to say, oh, no, this is the ballot paper and the only ballot paper that took place. I have had the opportunity to talk with eyewitnesses, people who participated in that referendum, people who are not politicians, I mean old fathers who participated in that referendum, and they have confirmed to me that they were actually 2 ballot papers. In fact, when I've also been to the archives in Boya, at Boya, the National Archives, and there also, there is clear indication, you will find that there is indication that there were actually 2 ballot papers. Now, that aside, coming back to the issue of the 1972 referendum, or the federation, and what transpired in 1972. So in 1972, what happened is that, first, even in Fumban, Ahijo had never been a believer of the federal system of government.
Okay.
We understand that in Fumban, the only reason why he gave into the idea of federation was because he wanted to please Foncha and his delegation. He never believed in it. His advisor, the French advisor who was with him, never believed in federation. They were centralists. They believed in the central system of government. And for them, the federal system of government was just something to lure Southern Cameroonians into the union, to woo them into the union. They never believed in it. And that is why right inside of that Fumban conference, right inside that conference, they started nursing the seed for the abolition of the federal system. How? The French version of that federal constitution indicated that that was supposed to be the federation was supposed to be an experiment, and that it was supposed to be a temporal measure. That same thing was not included in the English version. It was only found in the French version. And then in that French version, they included a paragraph that said the authentic version of the Constitution, which means the English version was not the authentic version. So you see from that level that there was no good faith in the Yaoundé delegation, there was bad faith, there was no sincerity, and so there was the determination right at that point, right in Fumban, to destroy the federation.
Okay, to destroy the federation. But just to note that at the level of Fumban, they were talking about a draft. Fumban was just a draft because other meetings took place.
Agreed.
Yes. Now, Ndukong, Clovis, 1972 referendum took place. Why is it very difficult to have a clear version of how things operated? We see things being presented from different prisms according to the positions that people take. The 1972 referendum is described like an elephant by blind people. Depending on where you touch it, you give your version.
Good evening. Before I proceed, I'm happy to be here among my fellow panelists, my learned senior barrister, Barrister Ashu, and my other senior colleague, Mr. Ndifor, Dr. Ndifor. I'm happy to be here, and we'll keep discussing about Cameroon because we are Cameroonians. I think only Cameroonians can sit together to better Cameroon. I think before talking about 20th of May 1972, Mr. Leo, I think Dr. Ndifor made a mention about issue of 1961 where the Republic of Cameroon delegation were not interested in a federation at all. I think one day on this platform, I keep repeating that the system of government operating by French government in Africa is different from the system of government operated by English. It is something that we don't always understand. The Francophone system of government is totally different from English system of government. Francophone system is presidentially centralized system of government, while English system is federalist. Most federated country in the world are English speaking, not French. You have Canada Federation, America Federation, Australia Federation, neighboring Nigeria Federation. Federation is not a French system of government. That's something that we need to know. So I'm saying like that based back on what Dr. Ndifor was saying. Since 1961, Mr. Lowe, before coming to that 20th of May 1972, immediately after the Informal Conference, I actually put in place a series of measures to dismantle in that 1972. We're only talking of 20th of May 1972, but I actually put in place a series of economic and political measures to dismantle the federal system of government. Yes, let me, before going to that 20, for example, on the 1st of September 1966, I just make sure that he dissolved all political parties in Cameroon to create only a single party called CNU, Cameroon National Union, and he was the head of the party. With only CNU in September 1966, there was no opposition party to stop him from changing Cameroon from federal to unitary. Again, I just put a political measure whereby I just make sure that only those who are entering his government are supporters of federalists. If you are against, a supporter of unitary. If you are against unitary, he will not be considered, or you will not be taken as a member of his government. If you are already in government and you are against unitary state, Ayo will put. He used constitutional powers. Article 5 and 6 of the former federal constitution have vested a lot of powers on Ayo. He was the head of state, head of government, commander-in-chief of the army, had power to appoint and dismiss any minister. So Ayo used that constitutional power to dismiss any person who was against the creation of unitary state. That's why in 1968 he successfully and disgracefully dismissed Augustin Ngomjua as the then Prime Minister of West Cameroon, because in 1968 it is called Augustin Ngomjua was against the creation of unitary state. And in 1970 his vice president in 1961, Djongo Foncha, was dismissed as the vice president of the Federal Republic of Cameroon because he was against the creation of unitary state. After removing Augustin Ngomjua and Foncha in 1960 and 1970 respectively, he now brought in Solomon Tande Muna, because Muna was working hand in glove with him for the creation of unity state. Muna was made the vice president at the same time the prime minister of West Cameroon. So before 1972, I just put in place a series of economic and political measures to make sure that Cameroon should be changed from federal to unitary.
Now, let us stay there. I wanted us to go back to this later in the program, but since you guys are already into it, now when parties were asked to dissolve in West Cameroon in favor of a Grand National Party, the CNU, that was in 1966, what were the politicians in West Cameroon thinking? Did the House of Assembly, West Cameroon House of Assembly, was it dissolved? It was still existing. Are you saying that they had no past? There was also the House of Chiefs.
Let me focus, first of all, before the dissolution of the three political parties, I think it was three, the KNDP, which was created in 1955 under Djongo Foncha, the CPNC of Ndeli, it was first KNC, but when he merged with another political party called KPP on Bile, it becomes CPNC, who were advocating for integration with Nigeria. So you have the KNDP of Foncha, you have the CPNC of Mr. Ndeli, and you have the CUC of a man called Solomon Tande Muna, who was created in 1965. So there were three key political parties in the state of West Cameroon before that 1966. Mr. Lo, it was very easy for Ayo to dissolve all the political parties that of West Cameroon. That the party of West Cameroon, it was very easy for Ayo that for them for the party to dissolve. In West Cameroon, there was what was known as political infighting between political parties of West Cameroon.
Okay, we're going to be looking at that. Let us look at the reasons that were advanced for the abrogation of federation in Cameroon. We know that there are economic, financial, political. Yes, those are the reasons that were advanced. Let us look at the economic reasons. It was considered that was very expensive because at the time they had the Federal Assembly, the East Cameroon House of Assembly, there was the West Cameroon House of Chiefs, and yes, and then we had the federal government, we had the East Cameroon government, we had the West Cameroon government. It was also considered that we have duplication of services. That is, we had federal government, West Cameroon government, East Cameroon government, West Cameroon Assembly, East Cameroon Assembly, then the Federal Assembly, and then we had the House of Chiefs.
Mr. Liu, what happened in Cameroon was influenced by the Chinese Revolution. You see, later events went to the detriment of President Ahidjo, who was fascinated by the Chinese model.
Okay.
So you see, the unitary state, he took it from the Chinese. And we all remember that when he was giving over power to President Biya, he thought that he was going to remain up there as the supreme head, and President Biya was going to be the nominal head. But history was going to catch up with him. Now, if you read this federal constitution, you will see that President Ahidjo was actually somebody who was a real dictator, because we all know that he appointed his vice presidents. But this constitution says that the president of the republic and the vice president were supposed to be elected by universal suffrage. So I don't know where he got the powers to be appointing others, but it is clearly inscribed in this constitution that the vice president and the president were supposed to be elected by universal suffrage. Now, coming to your question, you see, the fallacy of expenditure. If you look at the constitution, at the end of it, they tell you that the proportion, the population was given at 800,000 for Southern Cameroons, and 800,000 for Southern Cameroon, and 3,200,000 for the Republic of Cameroon. And people were supposed to be elected into the parliament on the basis of one representative per 80,000 people. So, going by that, if you go by that, you will see that it is not less expensive to, if you compare to what we have today, to have 180 parliamentarians and then 100 senators. That makes 280. If you divide that by this proportion, by what is provided here, you'll see that the proponents of the expensive theory, they don't win. Now, I don't understand why they were putting expenditure in front of development. Because now that we have everything inside one pot, under the knife of one person, we all see the vices, misappropriation of public funds. One minister could afford to do away with 200 billion, like we saw in the Munchipu Gate. One minister carries that much. You look at the case of Ndukong. I mean, all these people who are in prison. One person takes monies that can finance about 3 or 4 ministries. That would not have been possible under the federal system, because the budget was divided and sent down to the federated states, and the federal government also had its ministries that were run independently and supervised the corresponding services in the federated states. So I don't understand why the proponents of this unitary state put efficiency in the back line and put low cost in front, because it is better to have an expensive government that is efficient than to have a low cost government that is inefficient. Like what we have today, you have a government where out of 70 ministers, due to tribalism, discontent is being spread around the country, because one region has a majority and all others are looked upon as orphans. It is not correct. Under a federal system, that would not have been the case. Development would have been spread out. Appointments would have been spread out, because they don't depend on one person. So we are moving from a system that was good that was broad-based to one that was funnel shape. Everything starts from one person and spreads down. If that one person is good, oh fine. If he is not as good, then the entire nation suffers, as it is the case today. So where do we go? Where do we go in this type of system where we've been carried from, where you could just go to Boya and say, please replace me this bulb, close me this pothole, to a system where for you to close the pothole or buy a bulb to replace a street lamp, you need to have that inscribed in the national budget, passed through National Assembly. I mean, how long will that take? 1 whole year for that thing to be voted before you come now to the budget of the council that has to come and replace that street lamp, which was not the case in the days of the federated states. Each state we had PWD, Public Works Department. They were there every day to see to it that the roads were maintained. You had this police off the road. The police, they were there on a daily basis. A vehicle that was bad, that was in bad condition, was not allowed to ply the road. They put off the road immediately. We had this famous policeman called Ekundi, Mr. Ekundi, who was very, very popular because he had used the stickers. Your vehicle is not roadworthy. He stamps it on it, and that vehicle can never stand on the road until it's repaired. But what do we have today? The man who is down there as a police commissioner is appointed from Yaoundé. You cannot touch him. Are you the one who appointed him?
Okay. Ndifor, let's look at the motives advanced for the abrogation, the expensive motive, but politicians themselves went down to convince the people. How convincing were their delivery? How did the people receive them when they came to say, okay, this is the best way forward? I'm sure you've read how campaigns went on in Camber, maybe in Bomenda, in Dorp, and...
Yeah, you see, Leonard, the ground had been prepared.
Okay.
And the people had been frustrated economically to the extent that they could easily welcome the idea of a unitary state. And let me explain that. You see, in Fumban, they did not settle on, with the federal system of government, there has to be revenue allocation. You know what the federated state, what revenue they are how they are supposed to manage their revenue, how they are supposed to, what is supposed to come in from the federal government and all of that. This kind of arrangement was not made. And instead, what happened is that in Fumban, or let me say in the negotiation and all of that that led to the constitution, what they did was that Southern Cameroon was to surrender its revenue to Yaoundé, to the federal government. And so the reason why Ahijo did this, he did not do it for nothing. He did not just come out with that from the blue. He did that deliberately to ensure that he frustrates the economy of West Cameroon. And so he wanted West Cameroon to rely entirely on the federal government. And that worked. By 1960, or by 1972, when the constitution the federation was abolished, Southern Cameroon relied, or West Cameroon relied entirely on the federal government. 70% of its revenue came from the federal government. And because 70% of its revenue came from the federal government, there was no source of revenue for West Cameroon, because everything, its custom revenue, all of that went to the federal government. Everything that was collected in terms of custom and all of that went to the federal government. And so it became very difficult for them to manage their budget within within Southern Cameroon. It is even reported that Prime Minister Joa demanded by 1966, asked for a loan from Ahijo of about 500 billion, if I'm not mistaken. And that is because they could not handle, they could not manage. The economy had been frustrated by Ahidjo, and that had been well planned. And so with all of that, Ahidjo now came up with the idea that West Cameroon could not balance its budget. And because West Cameroon could not balance its budget, West Cameroon could not survive as a state. And now pushed the argument. And at that time, many southern Cameroonians were already frustrated with the economic hardship. And so when the argument came up that with a unitary system of government, all these economic problems, challenges are going to be handled, are going to be resolved.
How precisely did President Ahmadu Ahidjo frustrate the economy of
I already said that. I said that the revenue of West Cameroon, its custom revenue and other revenues from West Cameroon were going to the federal government. Everything went to the federal coffers. But if you look at how, you should also understand that Ahidjo did not understand how federation works. They have been used to the French system of the centralized system. He did not even understand how the federal system will operate. And so everything went into the federal government. And for that reason, it became very difficult. If you know how a typical federal system of government operates, you understand that in the typical federal system, when the state raises funds, part of the funds is kept within the state, and the other part is sent to the federal government. A percentage of it is sent to the federal government.
Okay.
But in this case, everything was sent to Yaoundé, and the West Cameroon government had to rely entirely on the federal government.
Definitely.
I want to say something, Mr. Leo. I think we're talking the history of Cameroon. I keep saying on platform that I'd always like to give historical analysis of Cameroon as a researcher in this field and not a politician.
Yeah.
We should always try to differentiate between politicians and researchers.
There are two politicians on this platform, Ndifor and...
No, I'm not talking here as a politician.
So
to give present the facts as they are.
Yes, I think before I go further, this issue of federation being expensive and influence the advocation of the abolition is historically it can be proven that federation was expensive. The one of Cameroon. Historically, that was say we are not politicians. On the 12th of May 1972, a critic of Ahidjo's regime, a veteran journalist called Sam Liga, he advised Cameroonians that federation is expensive, and it is very clear that it was expensive. That within the context of Cameroon, you were calling as you did not specify. There were 4 assemblies in Cameroon. East Cameroon House of Assembly, 100 members. Federal House of Assembly, Yaoundé, 50 members. West Cameroon House of Assembly, 37 members. West Cameroon House of Chiefs, 26. Giving a total of more than 213 member deputies that live on state budget. Not to take off the government, the federal government in Yaoundé, the East Cameroon government in Yaoundé, and the West Cameroon government in Boya. Just a historical fact that federation was expensive for a third world country like Cameroon. To run that heavy decision. Now let me come. I still want to look on this issue. Again, we talk about this issue of economy of West Cameroon as my other learned colleague, Mr. Dr. Ndifor was talking of. It is clear that West Cameroon had its own financial challenges. They had their own financial weakness that were exploited or used by the federal government. But there were institutions in West Cameroon that were mismanaged by West Cameroon themselves. That I always like that we limit within federation, because there are things that we want to go here. To look within Anglophone, we discover that we play a part in the closure of federation in 1972. Ahidjo had a part to play, Frank had a part to play, West Cameroon had a part to play that federation should be dissolved on the 20th of May 1972. Sometimes we go emotional, only blaming Ahidjo, only blaming the government, French government.
What institutions existed?
For example, there was a bank in West Cameroon known as the West Cameroon Bank. It was in charge of payment of civil servants in West Cameroon. It was in charge of payment of civil servants in West Cameroon. It was directly under the government of West Cameroon. and not under the federal government Yaoundé. But Mr. Leo, one of the reasons why this West Cameroon had financial difficulties and finally unable to pay civil servants was because of mismanagement by West Cameroonian, not by the government of Mr. Ajo. It is very clear, history states very clear that they had a very poor way of lending money, borrowing money. Sometimes they can borrow money to an individual to pay it after 89 years. Those are historical facts. It is very clear. Now, in 1966, as my fellow colleague Mr. Ndifor was saying, in 1966, this particular bank was unable to pay civil servants in West Cameroon. But, Mr. Leonard, it's very clear that by 1972, 60% of West Cameroonians who supported the Ajo to change Cameroon from federal to unitary were civil servants. By 1966, the per capita income of West Cameroon civil servants. But by 1966, the per capita income of West Cameroon civil servants was 19,000 francs. To East Cameroon was 46,000 francs per capita income. So I just want to play the issue of this financial economic crisis in West Cameroon. Now, because of this, I'll take an example for this institution known as West Cameroon Bank. That although we are talking about Ajo playing on maneuver to weaken the West Cameroon economy, but West Cameroon themselves also contribute to the weakness of West Cameroon economy. The example with this bank that was managed by West Cameroonian, and we were unable to take care of civil servants in West Cameroon. That is why he was giving mention that the federal government in 1960 had to give there was in 1966 Augustine Gonjua called for a commission under the Charter Commission, the Chartered Accountant of West Cameroon Bank, and Joki Manga. Joki Manga give an analysis making it clear that more than 320 million francs is nowhere to be accounted for. I've given on loans to the very West Cameroonian, not to the French Cameroonian. So I just want to elaborate on this because there are some certain weaknesses that within federation that within the closure of unity state that we always like to shift blame to the president of Amada Ajo. He had a part to play. He played 60% of it. But within West Cameroonian themselves, as senior barrister, we also play a part in the closure of the federal federation in 1972. And Mr. Lowe, I would remain again within there's a hidden motive that we hardly bring it out for the closure of the Federal Republic of Cameroon. One of the hidden economic motives was the discovery of large deposits of crude oil in West Cameroon at Cape Limbo. That was Victoria, present day to the limit. Those are the hidden historical motives, that economic motive why Federation was closed in 1972 to introduce unitary. In August 1964, a large deposit of crude oil was discovered at Cape Limbo in Victoria. With the discovery of this large deposit of crude oil or petrol, it became a threat. It started proving that West Cameroon will become economically viable, and by nature had it. When people are economically viable, they don't depend on somebody again. The truth about the discovery of this petrol in West Cameroon is that I just started having that belief with the influence of France that should Cameroon remain federation, it is very easy that tomorrow West Cameroon will say that they want to break away because they would tap oil they will start having, they will become very wealthy or rich because of the oil from discovering West Cameroon, and because of that wealth or because being rich now, they will not want to depend on the federal government, or they might say that they want to quit the union. And it's very clear that in the 1960s, most independent African states, areas where they were threatening to secede or to break away, with areas that were rich in resources. I have learned a lot of lessons. Example, in the 1960s, it was not only West Cameroon with oil. In Southern Africa, there was a country called Congo. When she had independence, a part of Congo was rich in copper, and that influenced the people of that Katanga region to advocate that they want to have that independence and be free and be on their own, only because they were rich in copper. That I just learned a lesson from that. Coming back to Nigeria again, that she also had independence in 1960, and because the eastern part of Nigeria were rich in oil resources, it also making them to also fight to create their own state known as the state of Biafra. So I think this issue of oil that was discovered in West Cameroon in 1964, on one of the economic motives that also influenced for the creation of unity state, because it was clear that if unity state is created, West Cameroon will not control. West Cameroon government will not control oil resources, but the federal government in Yaoundé under unity state.
Okay, we are looking at politically. You are a politician. How did the politicians themselves contribute or assist President Amadou Ahidjo to abrogate this federal structure?
Mr. Leo,
or they were completely helpless?
Mr. Leo, the truth should be told.
Okay.
We've heard on several occasions, people say that Certain big families in southern Cameroon took loans of 100 years and were unable to pay. And when you ask them, when you pin the people who propound those type of lies, pin them down, there is no documentary proof that can be presented. I will give you the truth here. Section 58 of the Constitution, of the Federal Constitution. Jusqu'à ce que le budget fédéral définitif soit adopté, un budget fédéral provisoire sera établi et sera financé par une contribution de chacun des États fédérés, déterminée après approbation des gouvernements de chacun de ces États. Somebody said here that this federal government took everything. And when you look at this provision, you see that there is truth in what Mr. Ndifor said. This is the provision under which the federal government determine what proportion, what ratio of money is produced by the federated states had to go to the federal government. And that's what they used to empty the coffers of southern Cameroon. I don't think anybody should tell us that it was mismanagement. This is what they use. Article 58. Now, under this same Article 58, because normally it is the federated states that manage their monies, that collected their monies, and the federal government came and took a proportion of it. Now, if southern Cameroon were supposed to, West Cameroon was supposed now to mine the oil that had been discovered, was the federal government going to have control over it? As he was saying, they agree with him. You see, when they saw that they could not have control over that oil, they now sought for a way of doing away with this federal constitution. And as I said, when you go through this constitution, there is no provision that gave Mr. Amadou Ahidjo, President of the Federal Republic of Cameroon, a right to convene the people by referendum. There is nothing. Now, let me correct something here, because I heard somebody say here that it was Amadou Ahidjo who produced the constitution. Please, historically, we have declassified documents from Britain. I'm sorry to say, but this is the truth. The federal constitution was prepared by Britain. They are the ones who brought that project, and they styled it the Federal United Republic of Cameroon. That was the project they gave Ahidjo. Ahidjo bought it, but southern Cameroonians did not buy it. Let me remind you that before the Fumban conference, the southern Cameroonians met in Manfe on what they called the Manfe Constitutional Talks, a conference, where they decided that they were going to Fumban to stand by confederation. They wanted confederation, not federation. Britain was trying to force federation on them. They refused. Ahidjo bought it, and that was the reason why, if you look at section 59 of this constitution, with their permission, sir, les présentes dispositions qui portent révision de la Constitution de la République adoptée le 21 février 1960 par le peuple camerounais entreront en vigueur le 1er octobre 1961. La Constitution ainsi révisée sera publiée en français et anglais, le texte en français faisant foi. I used to say it, this document is the exclusive production of the Parliament of the Republic of Cameroon. Southern Cameroons had nothing to do with it. Article 59. Now, on this your very platform, somebody said here that...
Finally, Senior Barrister, we are discussing something else. Yeah, because you've not answered my question. And sir, always when you people go out of topic and I want to bring you, maybe the audience would say,
please,
look at the topic. The topic is 20th of May. Ndifor is talking about 20th May, and him, anytime I ask a question, you are talking something else.
Excuse me, Mr. Liu. Your topic is 20th of May. What is our real history?
Yeah, but there are days that we discuss plebiscite. That is our history.
Well, you say
20th May. That's our history.
Me, you say what is our real history? Yeah, let us put 20th of May in historical context.
Yeah, but
what are we supposed to retain?
But I'm asking you questions now, Senior Barrister. Except all of what I've prepared is of no use now.
Yeah.
I've asked you about politicians. You are talking completely something else.
Sir, I think what I am saying here is what was governing the politics of the day. This is it. The people of the politicians of that day were being governed by this constitution. That's why I am putting it in context. That when you take,
you are doing politics is exactly what
I'm a legal mind, sir.
No, exactly what politicians do anytime they come on the platform. You ask them a question, you want to pass your message.
No, I say I'm a legal mind, sir. I take the document that was governing politicians at that time, and I say, when you look at this document, you understand that in answer to what he was saying, it is not Southern Cameroonian mismanagement.
You are answering my question, or you are answering what he said as senior barrister?
Mr. Kum, where your question was, how did politicians view the changes that were coming? And they had digressed from that to say that because of mismanagement, the politician had a certain pattern of behavior. I say no, they didn't, because the law that was governing politics at that time made it possible for the federal government to carry everything. That's what I was saying here. And I come further to say this law that was governing the politics at that time was even a law that was Ahijo's law. It was not something from Southern Cameroon. So they were other things that were motivating these people. Now, I had given you the insight that Ahijo was motivated by the Chinese regime. They want the unitary system. He was taking it from China, and he was presenting it as something that was going to bring prosperity. So you see, the politician had to understand that if everybody, okay, look at it, if
so
all the politicians,
I myself am lost in this discussion. Sincerely,
Mr.
Go on.
Okay,
But I'm lost.
Let us go back to 1966.
No,
let's go back to 66.
Go to your end, because I am sincerely lost. Yes.
All right. Let's go back to 66. All the political parties were asked to come together and create one party, which was the CNU. Now, under the CNU, which was a political umbrella, Mr. Ahijo was standing up there alone, and all the others were almost inexistent. Now, remember that the CNU, while the CNU was there, this constitution was being applied. And this man wanted full power, not only to control the politics of the day, but to control the resources. I cite this Article 58, because from here, it shows you that the federal government did not have command on the resources. They could go and take, but they could not go down to the grassroots to collect the money themselves. So he needed powers that will enable him go down there and take the money directly and put into the federal treasury, into his own treasury. And that's why he came up with this thing of unitary state. Because if he had to maintain the federal structure, the president had powers, yes, but he did not have enough money. He could only get money that he collected from the federated states. He could not go down to the field himself and take anything. He had no power over the underground, the mineral wealth, because it is the federated state that control those areas. So I am saying that the politics of the day were governed by the constitution that was applicable. And when you look at that constitution, you see that under it, Ahijo did not have the powers. So he needed something that would give him the possibility of controlling the entire nation. And that's why he came up with this federal constitution.
Now we have the Constitution of Cameroon that gives enormous powers to the President of the Republic, President Paul Biya. Now we have existing political parties in Cameroon. Are we saying that because the Constitution of Cameroon gives very greater powers to the President of the Republic, the opposition parties like Frundi, Kawalas, and the rest are so powerless? Is that what we are saying here?
Well, Leonard,
because I want us to look at. My question to you is how politicians contributed in accompanying President Amadou Ahijo to establish this. You cited some of the political parties that existed. The essence of this program is for people to, because when you are talking There are students who are writing the GC. They know you are. Thanks to you, I'm hearing about Mbile and the party, Estimuna and the party. Those are the politicians. Are we saying that they were so helpless?
Well, Leonard, you see, again, when I mentioned to you that it becomes very difficult to talk about the events of 1972
without going back,
going a little bit back to look at the things that happened moving up to 1972. And one of the events which marked which contributed to the abolition of the federal system of government was the formation of the CNU, of the one-party state. And I'm sure you want to understand the maneuvers that happened among those different politicians leading up to the formation of that one-party state that now gave Ahidjo that power.
The leeway, yes.
To be able to do that. Now, you realize that before then there was a lot of infighting. There was a lot of fighting within Southern Cameroonian politicians. There was that conflict. The opposition in Delhi, the KNDP political party, because Ndele had the opposition CPNC, and then of the ruling KNDP party, and at the same time we had Estimuna's CUC, Cameroon United Congress, which he founded after the conflict within the KNDP. And so these different political parties, the political leaders, they were at each other's throat, and each one wanting to, given the kind of powers that Ahidjo had accumulated for himself in Fuman, the Cameroonian politicians were now relying on him. They knew that each one of them, pretty much like what is happening today, everybody wants to gain favor from Biya, and everybody wants to act in ways that Biya will see him as that person,
the nice guy.
Good, as the nice person, as the person who is aligned with him.
Yeah, but I'm not sure Senior Barrister is doing that.
Yeah, what came from Fuman? I want to please clear the air. What was what came from Fuman?
Yeah, so I don't understand the Barrister. No, well, what?
When is the document that came from Fuman that gave Ahidjo powers?
Well, that is the thing. The federal
was signed in Fuman.
Well, even if nothing was signed in Fuman or whatever, at the end of the day, there was a constitution.
From Fuman, nothing.
We don't care whether it's from Fuman.
After Fuman,
it may not exactly. And so, but there was a constitution that came out after Fuman. I agree with you.
That constitution came before Fuman. It came from Boya to Bamenda to Fuman.
But that is not the basis of the discussion, Senior Barrister.
I just wanted to clear the air.
Yeah, no. What I want us to understand is that there was a constitution. We are not talking about where the constitution came from, whether it came from Fuman, whether it came from Boya or it came from Yaoundé, but there was a constitution.
There was a project, sir.
No, let us agree here.
A project.
There was a federal constitution.
No, sir. There was a project.
Which you yourself have shared with us here. These are the constitution.
Mr. Kun, please.
All right. So let me make my point to the logical conclusion. So with that federal constitution, it gave enormous power to Ahidjo. No. And with that power that Ahidjo had, the different politicians in Southern Cameroon, each one of them were trying to gain favor. And so when Ahidjo cooked up this scheme of wanting to create a grand national party where all other political parties had to be dissolved, the first thing that happened was that Foncha first of all proposed that let us first in Southern Cameroons dissolve all our political parties and fuse it into the KNDP, which was the ruling political party, and then we use the KNDP to negotiate with Ahidjo and then create a single political party, which would mean that the KNDP and the CNU or the CU, Ahidjo's political party was the CU at the time. The CU, they now merged to form now whatever party they would have formed, if it's the CNU or whatever. But Ndele, the opposition leader, opposed, just like Muna opposed that, oh no, we should all dissolve our political parties and then a single political party should be created. The idea of us fusing our political parties into one should not come up. All right. So there was that disagreement among them that Ahidjo exploited to his benefit. And so therefore, when he dissolved all of these political parties and now created the one political party that existed.
No. 1961.
1966. No, that was when the political parties was.
1961. There are political parties that existed and made convinced Cameroonians that we are voting to join. We are getting independence by joining.
Exactly.
This one that was the integration with Nigeria. Now you have been given the mandate by the people.
Exactly.
And in 1966, you are agreeing to dissolving your parties.
Political parties.
Yes. Were the people consulted?
Of course, no. They were not. There was no consultation made at the level of maybe reaching out to the people. I don't know if some kind of education was made for the people, or sensitization to let the people know that this is where we are heading to, or all of that. All we know is that Ahidjo, during the Congress of the CU of the Cameroon Union Cameroon, UC, sorry, UC or CU, Union Cameroon. He, during that Congress, he announced his intention of wanting Cameroon to have a single political party that will carry the vision of Cameroon and move Cameroon forward. That was the idea he brought up. And what I'm saying is that he consulted Southern Cameroonian politicians on the issue. He consulted them on the issue. And when he consulted them on the issue, Foncha, who was now the leader in Southern Cameroon, or in West Cameroon, who was the premier in West Cameroon, and whose party was the ruling party in West Cameroon, said, okay, now that the president said we should now have a single political party, my idea is that we all who come from West Cameroon, we should all fuse our political parties into one party, so that there is one party that left West Cameroon, and then negotiate with East Cameroon, and then fuse it to have a single political party. But because of, as I explained, because of the political maneuvering that was happening at the time, with each one wanting favor from Ahidjo, these politicians saw it as if it was Foncha wanting to present his face before Ahidjo and keeping them aside. And so they say, oh no, what we should do is that we all dissolved our political party and let that one political party that Ahidjo wants to create
absorb everybody.
Let him create that political party, and there should be no idea of us fusing into a single party in West Cameroon.
Why do we know very little about what politicians did to pave the way for the abrogation of the federal structure? Nobody's talking about, like you are explaining, that there was a maneuver where some school of thoughts wanted that they create a unified West Cameroonian party that negotiates for the creation of this Grand National Party. Why do we know very little about all of the intricacies that went through?
Mr. Leonard, it's just because when we are giving analysis about this creation of unity state, when we sit on the platform here, we keep all the time shifting blame to Ahidjo, shifting blame to France. Yeah, I keep repeating, it was not all about Ahidjo. It was not all about France. The team that was sent to do campaign in West Cameroon, they were not francophone among them. A language headed the southern team, while Fonja and other headed the northern team to go and do campaign. That I quite remember that, Mr. Leonard. It was a certain Reverend Father Neba of St. Beat and a certain Stephen Guest in Fundom that they were arrested on that day because they were saying that people should vote for federation, not unitary. The real outstanding elite of West Cameroon, all of them were supporting Ahidjo that they should create a unitary state. And that's why I earlier said on the platform that we should stop. Let's say Ahidjo and Frank contributed 70%, but 30% were West Cameroonian themselves who contributed to the dissolution of the creation of federal. I can give historical analysis.
Okay.
The first set of West Cameroonians who massively supported Ahidjo that they should change Cameroon from federal to unitary were civil servants. Why? The salary was always irregular and low as compared to civil salary in East Cameroon. And we have talked about the financial crisis of West Cameroon Bank that was unable to pay their salary regularly. That make them to believe that if we can support Ayejo to change Cameroon from federal to unitary, we'll have a better and steady salary like civil servant in East Cameroon. That's the first set of people who supported, and they were Anglophones, West Cameroonian. The second set of West Cameroonian who also supported the creation of university with the West Cameroon politicians themselves. Between 1963 and 1965, there was a crisis in West Cameroon known as the KNDP crisis. The infighting among West Cameroon politicians, at the end of the day, it became a situation within the KNDP from that 1963 to 1965. Some politicians like Estimuna left in 1965. He left KNDP and created his own party known as Cameroon United Congress. At the end of the day, by 1965, politicians in West Cameroon, there was that division, that hatred among politicians in West Cameroon to an extent that the only survivor was Ayejo. So that anything Ayejo said, they will say yes. So for this one, we are not blaming the West Cameroon politicians for their self-centeredness and self-interest, making them to support Ayejo to create unity in 1972. The last class of people from West Cameroon, I like us to be looking at historically. I earlier said on this platform, I'm not a politician. The last class of West Cameroonians who influenced and supported Ayejo that Cameroon should be changed from federal to unitary were some elite of the then, it was formerly known as the Coastal and Forest region, today Southwest. Yes, some elite of the then former Coastal and Forest, today Southwest, they supported that Ayejo should change Cameroon from federal to unitary, because under federation from 1961 to 1972, according to the argument of the politicians of the then Coastal and Forest, today Southwest, the tribalism that was in West Cameroon, the tribalism of the ruling KNDP party, was to an extent that I think there was a certain KNDP militant called Winker. Winker was dismissed simply because they saw him coming from Mr. Ndele's house only to make a call. The tribalism that perpetrated KNDP politicians in West Cameroon under Jongo Foncha, they were militant that could not know how to write their name, no read, but they would be appointed, put in position only because of their affiliation to KNDP. Because of that, some politicians of today, Southwest, formerly known as Coastal and Forest region, they started seeing that since the ruling party of KNDP, Foncha, which is from Del Grassfield to the Northwest, is only putting his tribesmen. That was historically clear. It's not politics. That the KNDP party have been putting only his tribesmen from the Grassfield, making these politicians of the Coastal and Forest region to start seeing that they are being marginalized. That is why a certain Waters Musombe created Vicoma, Victoria Kumamanfi. The reason why he created Vicoma was to wanted to agree on how they can fight against the Grassfield domination under West Cameroon, under KNDP party. And I make it clear that although they were crying like that, the domination of Foncha and his tribalism on KNDP party was not only within the whole of Grassfield, it limited only within Mezam, making other politicians in the Grassfield region like Mr. Tamfo, Nkambe and others to massively support the Ndele, CPNC, for integration with Nigeria. That is why when you look at the plebiscite result, the majority of Nkambe voted for integration with Nigeria. And when they failed, they supported Ndele to go to UN and asked that the part that voted for Nigeria should go there and be part of Nigeria. Okay. Yes, historically, you have even the Oroko, the Bafos, the Bakweris, and the Nkambe. They went back to UN. Well, I think we should create time for this to educate Cameroonians. And I'm saying like that because we look at these areas that there are some areas today in North and Southwest that they hated reunification with all their blood, but today they are masters of reunification. In the 1960s, they were called recessionists, but today they are masters of reunification as far as this crisis is concerned. So I was just trying to bring it to say that we should know that West Cameroonians play a part in the closure of unity in 1972. So what is that this West Cameroonian, this politician of Coastal and Forest region, according to the believe that Mr. Leonard, in 1972, if they create unity state, they will create their own region. If they create their own region, they will free from Grassfield domination. That was the simple truth about why that made them to support. So it is very clear that West Cameroon civil servant supported Ayejo that they should create unity state so that they will have better salary like East Cameroon civil servant. Secondly, self-centeredness, tribalism, and self-interest among West Cameroon politicians like Agustin Gomjua, like Solomon Tandemuna, like Foncha, interest for their own position, make them support Ayejo for the creation of unity state. And lastly, some elite of Coastal and Forest region, today Southwest, supported Ayejo to create unity state so that they will have their own region. That is why today, when we want to talk about one of the benefits of the creation of unity state on West Cameroonian, is we say that it led to the creation of two regions, Northwest and Southwest, making the elite or the coastal and forest to be free from Northwest domination, tension, and tribalism. Those are clear historical facts.
Okay.
They are not political or emotional politicians. I thought we are a researcher in the field.
Yes, we have the president of the Reform Party. Now, you are the national president of the Reform Party, and your political manifesto is a federation. Why, according to you, from 1972 to 2023, where we are today, things have not worked according to the presented picture by President Ahmadu Ahidjo?
Mr. Kum, I want to differ with my good friend here, because what we see as a result of your question is that the powers given to the president of the Federal Republic were not far-reaching.
Okay.
If you compare the powers of the President of the Federal Republic in this constitution to the present powers of the President of the Republic of Cameroon, it's like day and night. Southern Cameroons came to independence with a well-established parliamentary democracy, and it was not easy for Ahmadu Ahidjo to outmaneuver them in decision making. As I earlier said, he had no access to the mineral wealth, he had no access to the finances, and this man wanted absolute power. So he started first of all by trying to silence the politicians by creating one party, causing them by word of mouth. There was no written document, by word of mouth, to close their parties and join him to create Cameroon National Union. After having done that, he now, because his problem was the form of the state, which did not give him the powers he needed. He wanted a system of government that would give him absolute power. And that is the reason why the 1972 revolution was not only a referendum in the air, it was a change of form of the state, from the federal system to the presidentialist system. Presidentialist system means the presidential system with the taking away of powers from the other organs of the state. Presidential system normally has three organs: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. You can see that Ahidjo satisfied his quest for power by emptying the powers of the judiciary and the parliament in favor of the president. Now, he created this technique that is found in the presidential regime, which is the services attached to the presidency, which he did not have under the federal constitution. And those services, you have the Secretary General, the Director of Civil Cabinet, the Director of Public Security, Minister of Defense. They are all attached to the presidency. That enables him, because he is the real Minister of Defense. He delegates power. Minister delegate in charge of defense. He is a delegate. The real Minister of Defense is the President of the Republic. That is what Ahidjo wanted. And he obtained that in his 1972 revolution. You ask the question, does it mean the other politicians were dormant? Yes, they were irrelevant. They were not just dormant, but they were totally irrelevant. It is not because they did not agree among themselves. They had been silenced in 1966 when Ahidjo crooked them into entering into his one-party forum, where no dissenting voice could come out, because any voice that came out was the voice of CNU. So no politician could stand up anywhere to oppose this macabre scheme.
Yeah, but did they not see this before accepting to dissolve into that?
Sir, I said previously on this channel that these people were working. There was something in the background that was influencing them. Kwame Nkrumah's Africanism, Pan-Africanism. They were being told that, look, as we should evolve towards Pan-Africanism. Let Africa be one group. And here in Cameroon, if all of you come together, you are promoting Pan-Africanism. That is even one of the reasons why they did not even bother to start checking Ahidjo. It is later on, when they saw the content of the presidential powers under the new regime, that most of them realized that they have been duped. they saw that, I mean, Ahijo had become a monster that none of them could control. So I see it as Ahijo's quest for absolute power. And he did that. He succeeded in doing this by quenching the political opposition, which he gathered inside the CNU.
Ahijo had become very powerful or a monster, because a monster just devours.
I said he was a monster. He was a monster because, look, this is a man who took over the country.
Yeah, we take exception to such descriptions. Please, use better
Sir,
you may not be nice to some person, but you will not want to.
Okay. I am saying that he was a political monster in that okay. He took over a country where there were many politicians who consulted each other before a decision was taken. But look at what he came up after the 1972 constitution.
Yeah, but he says that there was disagreement amongst them.
Well, I don't remember any forum where there was any disagreement, because what I remember vividly is that this man was a master planner and he was working with the French advisors. They advised him, first of all, you start by silencing political opposition. And he did that.
These people, they are teaching history.
I don't know what they are teaching. I am saying that I just silencing political opposition by bringing everybody under the same thinking cap. If they have proof that Ahijo did not silence political opposition by creating CNU, let them give us a proof, because that is what we see.
All right.
See, what Senior Barrister is saying is simple. We should not only, Barrister, what you are saying, his power is not even from that. This is the highest blunder or the outcome of the Fumban, the Yaoundé tripartite, was the fact that at the end of the
nobody
day,
signed anything.
Yeah, would they just say that whether he will not sign, whether even on the unsigned document, the highest blunder is that at the end of this constitutional conference, Ahijo left as the #1 constitutional man. Ahijo, listen now, let me learn. I mean, let's go back now, Barrister. Ahijo left as the man with all executive powers. Do you know that immediately after the Fumban conference in July 1961, in October, 20th of October 1961, Ahijo used for a presidential degree to divide the whole Federal Republic of Cameroon, which was made of 2 states, the state of West Cameroon and East Cameroon. Ahijo used a presidential degree signed on the 20th of October 1961 to divide the whole of Cameroon.
By virtue of this,
he divided the Federal Republic of Cameroon into 6 territorial administrative regions, headed by federal inspectors.
It is his own.
Headed by federal inspectors, and this inspector had wider powers than the state prime minister, giving like the one who was sent to West Cameroon, Jean Klongo. In West Cameroon, when Jean Klongo said, when anything he said, Augustin Ngom tried to argue because he was the eye of Ahijo in West Cameroon. So what I'm saying is that by the virtue of the Ahijo's federal constitution or the federal constitution in Fumban, at the end of the day, it was the highest thing that it did was that constitutional or executive power in the hand of President Ahijo, head of state, head of government, commander-in-chief of the army, had power to appoint and dismiss ministers. That is why Foncha, who was his VP in 1970, he dismissed Foncha.